Hello, everyone. Wherever you are in Asia Pacific or indeed in the world, I did see we had some attendees from outside the region, which is fantastic. We're super excited to be bringing you another webinar in this series. This time we're looking at changes in the modern classroom and how educational institutions have and can continue to move to a working from home environment. And in particular, we're going to be focusing on trends in VDI and PC over IP technology. Just a few housekeeping things to cover off. This is an interactive webinar, so if you have a question you want to ask any of the panelists, feel free to submit it in the Ask a Question box. We'll either address it during the discussion if it makes sense, or we'll get to it at the end in the question and answer. There's also some additional information available. You can click on the attachments tab and feel free to download it and take a look. Okay, just quickly going through the agenda. I'll introduce our speakers and the panel experts more fully. Each of the panelists will give you a very quick rundown of their company and what they do and how they add value. We'll then get to the meat of the webinar, which is going to be a roundtable panel discussion, and then we'll do the Q&A session at the end. Okay, first of all, so just to quickly introduce you to the panel experts, we'll have Paul Austin, who is a director of Teradici's global channel. We have Michael Lang joining us from NVIDIA, based out of Melbourne. By the way, Paul is based out of Cleveland, Ohio. And then we have Chris Haswell from Amulet Hotkey, who's based out of North America also. Just to give you a quick rundown about what we do. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy Hampf, and I focus on channel development here at Sapply, and I do that all over the Asia Pacific region. As our business, we act either as the regional distributor or a strategic partner for all of today's panelists. So feel free to get in touch with us if there's anything we can help you with, or you have any additional questions or requirements after the webinar. Even if you're outside the Asia Pacific region, feel free to get in touch and we'll be able to put you in touch with the relevant people for your region. Okay, so I think that's enough talking from me for now. And now it's time to learn more about our amazing panelists. So I'll hand you over to Paul Austin from Teradici.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jeremy. Really appreciate it. I'm really glad to be here with you all. I'd like to share a little bit about Teradici. Some people think that we make espresso machines or that we're in the business of bespoke Italian suits. Nothing could be further from the truth. We're a technology company that makes the kind of work from home and really working from anywhere that has become particularly prevalent in the world that we're in right now. It makes it all possible. And a little bit about us, we invented the PC over IP remoting protocol. It's what makes it possible for a user to see on their computer monitor screen something that is a compute workload that is stored in a data center that could be thousands of kilometers away. By our reckoning, there's roughly 15 million or so odd workloads that are trusted to the PC over IP protocol, and we number our customers and our clients from the very smallest businesses and institutions all the way up to the global Fortune 500. And we work with a huge ecosystem of partners to deliver our solutions. A little bit about Teradici and why it really matters. We really start with something that is top of mind for pretty much everyone in this day and age, which is really security. And our focus on a bedrock approach to security means that we deliver an ultra-secure remoting architecture that includes data center components, which are encrypted and encoded, endpoint components that decrypt and decode, and a secure transmission of basically just pixels over the network that is not only highly optimized, but also extremely secure. Typically, when you're talking about security, you're talking about trade-offs in terms of user experience, but that is not the case with our solutions. We really focus on delivering a no compromise user experience. As you look at the other things that really matter, and in considering why Teradici, the ease of deployment and the manageability via our solution, it's extremely simple, it's easy to deploy, it's reliable, it's predictable. And then finally, I think one of the things that really matters to a lot of educational institutions that tend to make their investments in IT components and infrastructure over time is that we are largely agnostic to a broad array of platforms. Another way of saying it is that we play extremely well with others. What we're going to be talking about today is CAS, Teradici CAS. CAS is our acronym, short form for Cloud Access Software, and it is our. I'm gonna define it as it's our solution to effectively bring the workload to the user in a way that's truly impactful, truly secure, and truly high performance. And it's built on our PC over IP technology. This is what makes it possible to deliver the truly high fidelity user experience. I'm talking about extremely artifact-free, color accurate delivery of what used to be the workstation that probably sat in a PC lab at your institution. Now, through our solution, can be brought directly to your users on a broad array of devices. And the way that it works is we have three key components in our solution. We have our agent technology, we have the endpoint devices themselves, the clients. You can think of the agents as the senders, if you like. You can think of the clients as the receivers. And then we also offer a management plane, which is something that IT folks are particularly interested in. They say, well, it's great that you've got a VDI platform, but how do I manage those desktops? How do I deploy them? How do I provision them? So our solution is a true end-to-end solution. And it is extremely versatile. This slide is, I particularly love this slide because it talks to all the different ways that our solutions can be deployed. We can deploy on-premises, virtualized, non-virtualized, bare metal. We can deploy through the wide area network, through a broad array of cloud service providers. And this is a particularly useful solution when you think about the ways that people are working, the ways that people are accessing these types of solutions. So remote users, that could be staff, that could be faculty, that could be students, and a number of institutions. They're also trying to expand the use of their investments, and then bringing in external contractors. You can have remote learning, sort of extension learning, so maybe not necessarily students, but in order to obtain additional revenue for the institution. Those folks can come in, and it's a very straightforward, very simple process to ensure that your institution is able to deliver the highest kind of results and the best educational outcomes, which ultimately makes your institution a lot more competitive and a lot more compelling. I'd like to turn it over now, again, just very quickly, I'd like to turn it over to our colleagues from Amulet Hotkey.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Chris Haswell. I'm a Director of Business Development here at Amulet Hotkey. If you're not familiar with who Amulet Hotkey is, we are a technology provider for remote computing as well as GPU acceleration offload. So, essentially what we're doing is we're taking the technologies from the other two panel experts here and merging them together to form a solution that works really well in terms of flexibility and performance. And so our platform, the base platform that we offer is called the core module. The core module is the small device that you see in the lower right-hand side of this slide. But it's designed, this particular one is designed to go inside a Dell MX7000 modular chassis. And we co-developed this module with Dell so that it integrates seamlessly with that server platform, and so that the IT administrator or the end user really doesn't know any different that you're running Dell hardware and non-Dell hardware. And so the core module itself has up to 4 pairs of NVIDIA T4 GPUs, which Michael's going to talk a little bit more about here. And then you can put 2 of these core modules into the MX7000 for a total of 16 GPUs. So the key takeaway from this particular solution is, number one, it's the only way you can enable GPU offload in the MX7000. But more importantly, it gives you the flexibility to deploy GPUs without impacting any of the other modules, any of the other server, storage, or networking modules that are installed in that MX7000. So some other modular platforms from other manufacturers require you to remove compute blades or do some reconfiguration or add additional hardware to enable it. Ours works seamlessly with the MX7000. So if you have one deployed, it's literally simply a matter of inserting the modules into the back of the chassis. So these modules go in what Dell calls their Fabric B. And so again, does not impact the compute functionality, the storage, or the networking. And so just a little bit more detail on what that solution looks like, and just to talk a little bit more about the flexibility of this. So again, up to 16 GPUs in the MX7000. The MX7000 itself has a number of different options in terms of how you configure this. And so they have 2 different size compute blades, the MX840C, which you can assign up to 4 GPUs per blade, or the MX740C, which you can assign up to 2 GPUs. And again, so the MX7000 platform enables you to mix and match. If you want to have, say, 2 MX840Cs with GPUs assigned, and then MX740Cs, 4 of them without GPUs, you can do that. You can have, one of each. It's really dependent on how you want to deploy these. And the beauty of it is the Dell sales teams have access to a configurator that we provide them that enables them to take your configuration the way you want to build this out, and then they can build out the appropriate Amulet Hotkey solution for this, just depending on how you want to do it. So again, really, really flexible and powerful, and doesn't impact your ability to use those compute nodes, those compute blades. So I talked about 2 different areas that we focus on. The second area is the remote computing aspect. Paul just talked about the Teradici Cloud Access software. What we make are secure endpoints, or zero clients, for that particular type of configuration. So these would connect securely to the MX7000 through the Cloud Access software. You can also, of course, use any standard desktop or laptop. But if you want a truly secure path to that data and to the to the school intranet or data center, these zero clients will allow you to do that. You simply plug them in, hook up a desktop keyboard and mouse to them, and then you can do a little configuration, and then you can have your users access the information on the server side without having to worry about, is someone going to put a USB key in and take information. There's no local storage on these. They're highly secure, And in fact, a number of federal governments use these because of their security. So you don't have to worry about people, hacking into different systems, because there's no way for them to do it with these. So as Paul talked, these will give you the same fidelity as if you were sitting in front of that workstation. So if you wanted to do a one-to-one workstation with one of these Zero clients, you can do that and have that high fidelity, pure color, user experience that you would get just from having a standard desktop or laptop. And so, this is very similar to the diagram that Paul showed, just a little bit more specific to the MX7000. But this is an example of how you can harness the flexibility of this platform. And so what we've got here is, half of the compute blades in the MX7000 acting as one-to-one dedicated workstations, where you get that high fidelity, pixel perfect display, and then you could configure the other half to be running virtual desktops for those users that didn't need that pixel perfect user experience. And so, but again, this functions with the Teradici software based on the hardware performance of the NVIDIA T4 graphics. So that's the quick overview of the Amulet Hotkey solution. We've got some documents that you can peruse, and of course we make other products as well in this space, both our own technology and co-developed with Dell. So with that, I will turn it over to Michael.
Great, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. So we sort of fit in the middle of actually between Paul and Chris in terms of the workloads and how we run. So I'm the solutions architecture specialist for professional visualization across ANZ and Southeast Asia. And the touch point I really want to talk about today, obviously we're known for our awesome gaming GPUs, but here we're on the enterprise side of the business talking about a variety of workloads. And the reason I'm showing you this today is, especially in the educational space, whilst virtual desktops for traditional PC type workloads, whether they be faculty or researchers or general students or even CAD engineering, whatever it may be, very much on the left-hand side here in the traditional graphics space. We're also getting an interesting piece on the right-hand side for compute-oriented workloads, whether again that be in the classroom or the research space. So I'll touch on that just a tad. But functionally speaking, we do get asked questions around different workloads and things like that, and what we can do and what sort of scale we can cater for. But really, the focus here, and I think Paul articulated this very well, the users are after an uncompromising high quality experience. And all PCs nowadays have some form of integrated or otherwise graphics on them, so they need to have that level of quality. But we've got that bifurcated with the needs of the IT department. And I think Chris touched really well on things like security, orchestration, flexibility, which is really what you get in the data center. So this is where we play in this to provide that high quality experience, regardless of the workload you're using, right? And making sure the user gets what they want, what they need, but we've still got flexibility in the DC to do what we need to do. Going to that point a bit further, we have a variety, as of our global GPU technology conference about 3 weeks ago, we launched a couple of new cards. You have a lot of choice in terms of what you want to do. And so these are cards we have in market. I'll be fair, my favorite card is in fact the T4. It's roughly the size of your mobile phone. It's got a lot of memory and a bucket load of cores, about 2,500 cores, and it does almost everything. It's just all shades of awesome. Plus, as Chris said, in terms of the form factor for blades, it's really, really highly dense. And of course, that comes down to things like cost per user. But certainly we do have quite a degree of flexibility depending on what you want to do. And workloads vary. So we can cater for that if we need to. So obviously we're going to have a few questions here that bounce back and forth, but the NVIDIA piece is really about making sure that what you can do on a desktop, you can also do in a virtual machine. CPUs only go so far. They do a great job of managing operating systems, but for graphically related workloads, this is where the GPU offload does its magic. And there's a few other acceleration bits and pieces we do with the all shades of awesome PCoIP protocol as part of the CAS suite as well. I'm going to leave that there. I'll probably explore a bit more of my stuff during some Q&A and questions, and I will hand back to Jeremy, our MC.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Paul, Chris, and Michael. Those were great introductions. Just a quick reminder, if you wanted to refer back to any of the slides that any of the panelists presented, you can download them from the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk screen. So now I think we'll move on to the main event, if you will, of the seminar, and that's the panel discussion. And I guess we might as well start with the hot topic of the moment. Well, it's a bit more than the moment now, but that is, how has COVID-19 changed the landscape for higher education IT departments from March 2020, when the world changed rather quickly, so in the early pandemic, until now? What has changed? And maybe Paul, do you want to start us off on that one? I think you're on mute, Paul. There we go.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, there we go. Got it.
This is one of the things that changed. Everybody has these kinds of meetings, and you spend maybe the first 30 seconds to a minute while everybody adjusts their microphone and takes themselves off mute. I jest, because it's actually quite a bit more serious than that. I think one of the things that we see is just this enormous acceleration of the work from anywhere culture. A lot of these institutions. Before joining Teradici, I was at Dell, and I worked with major public institutions like the University of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania State University system, massive major public institutions, West Virginia University, where we used to set up multi-session servers in classrooms, if you can believe that, and we did sort of the sort of reverse VDI. So there were always flavors of it, but I think that this was obviously a huge accelerator for those institutions. That's, I think, the most obvious change, is that all of a sudden the students, staff, and faculty had all been dealt the no alternative card. They were forced to carry on with whatever they had at hand. So in many cases, that meant students who were taking media and entertainment courses, for example, and we're learning how to do color grading, or we're learning how to do visual effects or animation or linear video editing. Did they have that stuff at home? Of course they didn't. They didn't have that stuff at home. So they would rely on the computer labs and the instructor's expertise. So I think what they had to do really quickly was pivot. And the technology was only part of it. I think that culture was another really big piece of it, kind of getting it in your heads. How do you recreate that classroom environment when everybody has really just sort of been thrown together? I think that's probably, in my opinion, that is the most significant outcome. And now you're muted, Jared.
So yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Michael, for a more Australia or an Asia Pacific related flavour, have you seen any massive underlying trends in particular that might be similar or different to what Paul's been seeing?
Yeah, so I'll make the joke, hey, every year's been the year of VDI since 2000 or whatever, right? But 2020, it all happened really, really fast. And it's interesting, depending what hat you wear when you ask this question, what changed for you, you have a different answer. So if you take, for example, the IT teams, one of my favourite customers is a TAFE, or Polytechnic in Melbourne. Okay, tools down, everybody go home right now, or don't come back. Even worse, right? So don't get to clean your desk out properly. And then, staff are more than happy to be safe, just focusing on faculty for a second. But hey, I'm happy to work from home. Paul's got a nice space there. I'm in a hotel at the moment. Things are all good. I need my tools. How do you get me my tools? And I had two sorts of customers. This particular TAFE had deployed VDI about 7 months earlier, and they said, right, here's a web page, log in, you're done. That's it, just do your work. If you've got any problems, log a ticket, we're all fine. And 90% of people just kept doing what they were doing. From a student perspective, and I think Paul articulated this well, it bifurcates whether we're talking about a generic desktop or whether we're talking about labs. And we've all heard stories about people who've had to sleep in a lab overnight to keep their workload running and all that sort of stuff. You can't do that during COVID. So those heavier workloads are really a challenge, and you can't tell people to take those desktops home. That's just not going to fly. So the ability to access those tools is very, very, very hard, remotely using traditional tool sets. So the old adage of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different outcome, that came to reality very, very fast. And it would have been very nice to have this webinar and say, gee, wasn't that a fun year? It's a thing of the past. Hey, whatevs. Sadly, here in Australia, we're still facing that. And for universities, one of the problems they have is students accessing stuff remotely, not just within Australia, but also throughout the region. So we have a very large diaspora of students. And some of those can't get back at the moment. So it's really it's a multifaceted problem depending on who you are and what your problem is. But rapid change was needed very quickly, and it needed to be scalable as well. Right? So big challenges.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul and Michael. Might jump to a question that might appeal to Chris more. I'll just let it load up here. We'll go with. So what have been some common challenges for moving from on-campus to remote learning computer labs? And the floor is open.
Well, I'm happy to tackle that one quickly, if you like. I think we saw, because touching on my point before around making hardware available to multiple people. But I'm actually going to flip the answer here in terms of the challenges. I'm going to talk about the opportunities. We've had a large number of universities go, hey, we don't need labs. We only need dedicated labs that can only do one thing. They're a one-trick pony. Now we've got a whole bunch of VMs in the data center. Turn them off, start another one. We've got high schools now that can actually have teachers run a script to shut down 30 VMs and start up a different set of VMs and entirely different classroom. So those dedicated, crampy workspaces that have to be labs, very 1919 style, that actually goes away. But the other point here, which is really interesting in terms of opportunity here, once you make these things remote, is equity. We had some interesting conversations with a Catholic university, and they said equity is a key part of what we do. And I asked them to explain that concept a bit. And what they said was, to the students who have maybe a Chromebook or something that's a very low-end PC, they now get precisely the same experience as the person who can get the high-end gaming GeForce machine with a whole bunch of RAM, and yes, they can play games after hours. They all have exactly the same experience, and moreover, doing that safely from home, but also reducing travel, accessibility, whether you live on campus, live remotely. This equity piece is really important. So it actually does provide opportunity, and also for the IT staff. So one of the banes of existence of IT people is, we can image the machines once a semester at the end of the semester when they all go home, and it's killing me now, right? It's a case of, we just tweaked the image last night. It's a new image today. And, actually, we stuffed it up. So we just rolled back to the previous image and it was all fine. We'll fix it again tonight. That's fine. You can't do those things on a gigabit or even 10 gigabit network out to 1,000 desktops. It doesn't work. So, yes, challenges, but opportunity as well.
Yeah, opportunities is spot on. If I could add to that, Mr. MC, Jeremy, I'd like to just sort of call out in particular that there's always been this kind of tension between IT and the consumers of IT services. IT is very interested in focusing on things like security and manageability. End users want flexibility. Like Michael just said, it's a matter of I used to go to my IT department and I would request that they would support an application. It would have to undergo architectural review. It could take months before I would get to my application. The opportunity here for IT departments is because of the nature of end user compute virtualization, you're decoupling the application from the underlying operating system and from the underlying hardware. So a lot of those dependencies are no longer there. That means that students, staff, faculty can have access to the applications very, very quickly without impacting the rest of the folks. And then obviously IT gets the benefit of having the management plane, having the ability to secure all of the assets. I mean, we've already banged on about security quite a bit, but there's a lot of other opportunities, a much more efficient use of licenses for applications, for example. I love the equity point, just how it's a great leveler. Anybody, regardless of their device, is going to have a user experience that closely replicates that of the workstation that used to sit in the lab.
Yeah, and I would tie into that as well. You know, Michael made a good point about, you know, sitting in the lab overnight and making sure your workload is running, or your render has completed. You know, by using a secure client and being able to do PC over IP, you don't have to be in the lab. You can tunnel in, and you can manage that workload and know that the whatever project you're working on is working the way you want it to. So, and you know, again, not to hammer the security nail again, but you know, security is super important, and you know, you don't. You know, even if you can be in the lab, these high-end workstations can run tens of thousands of dollars, and this way you don't have to worry about, you know, someone kicking a cord or dumping their coffee on it or something like that. It's physically secure as well as you know, data secure, if you will.
Yeah, those are really, really interesting observation, guys. Follow-up question that might be the most relevant for Michael, as he's based domestically, but in Australia and in some parts of Southeast Asia, as we've seen some of the COVID restrictions be loosened and people start to return to campuses and return to schools, are we seeing a subsequent return to the legacy systems that these educational organizations had in place, or are you finding that they are staying with these virtualized and remote solutions that they were forced to deploy during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously organizations that have assets they need to sweat, you know, desktops often have a 3-year life cycle. They'll continue to use those whatever they do, although many of them have just dumped in the data center now because they've realized this whole, you know, virtual piece will flip it from to some, you know, next 7,000 blades over time. And they've actually seen that, you know, these things can be easier to scale at the data center layer. So, you know, as Chris was saying before, with the blades you can put into a chassis, you may not necessarily populate the entire thing in one hit, but you know, adding another blade in and having that automatically orchestrated is a really quick way to do the things you need to do. So for those customers who've experienced the benefits and have built that into their operational models, they're loving it. Absolutely loving it, and they tend to fly with it. That TAFE I mentioned before, who sent all the staff home, they went from the CIO going, gee, you know, it was an expensive, challenging project to get it done, to COVID hit. Fantastic, let's do phase 2 and deploy the T4s for all the CAD engineering students. Yay, let's make a case study out of it. So the articulation went from, you know, oh, IT to wow, IT very, very quickly, and they've gone to very much a zero footprint model. The other one, and I'm going to Chris's point of earlier, so there was an education institution in Australia that experienced a security breach. I won't go into details for it, but did make the newspapers. And of course, when we talk about, you know, threat modeling, having a zero client where the USB ports don't work or they're highly controlled in terms of what they do, that makes a really, really big difference to your security posture. And all of a sudden, just by delivering these other benefits, you've all of a sudden changed your security model as well. And that changes what and how you do things. And these added benefits sometimes they're intangible and you don't see them until you have it. And I'll make an electric car joke here. Electric cars, what's the benefit? Well, I haven't been to a service station to get petrol for a very long time. That's actually making my commute easier. You don't know that until you've got the car, right? So we see these things for organizations that deploy it well, and they love it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, Jeremy, you replace all of those workstations in a PC lab. Let's say you've got 4 PC labs, 25 workstations in them a piece. Even when they start returning to the PC lab, it will be different. Those PCs, those workstations will no longer be there, because the knock-on benefit of centralizing that workload in an end-user compute virtualization context means that now you've got these ultra-secure zero-client devices that present absolutely no management. I mean, what do you have to manage? And zero attack surface, either logically or physically. There's no local data stored on these things. Just imagine from the faculty's perspective, the instructor who used to have to hold up the entire class while some student in the previous one had monkeyed around and had downloaded things. I mean, this goes to liability for the institution. It goes to its performance metrics. Again, there's so much additional ancillary benefit to having deployed these types of solutions, not just for COVID, but for the world after COVID. Nothing's ever going to return to the normal that was, but as things start to settle into a new pattern, I think that institutions that have deployed these solutions are going to recognize enormous benefits.
Awesome stuff. So it definitely sounds like that this technology is here to stay, even post-pandemic, which is just fantastic and exciting. Just before we carry on, we've had a couple of questions come through. Just remember, feel free to submit anything in the question tab, and we'll be able to continue the discussion in the Q&A session. Okay, for our next discussion point, there could well be some people in the audience in here thinking, well, this is all well and good for standard workloads. What if I'm in a film school or an engineering school and I'm using graphically intensive applications? So what about graphics intensive workloads and intense compute capacity? So either Chris or Michael, would you like to talk about what the role of GPU hardware acceleration plays in students having superior performance on these virtual workstations?
Sure. Yeah, I've actually got a real world case study of this, and I'll let Michael take it after this. But we actually, if you're familiar with the animated series South Park, they did a pandemic special last year, and they did it using our Zero clients and our virtual workstations. And so obviously, to do the amount of media creation, rendering, collaboration amongst a dispersed workforce, it was highly important for them to have that pixel perfect graphics capability. And so I think that's a real world example. They actually produced the pandemic special on it. You can go to YouTube and just look up South Park pandemic special, and if you look really closely, you can see one of our Zero clients in that video. But it was all done remotely. It was all done with Zero clients, remote workstations, PC over IP, and those are some of the most graphically intense applications that you can do, and they did it. So yeah, it's not just possible. It's been done. So
that's awesome. I did see the South Park pandemic special. Probably can't get into some of the finer points discussion.
Probably not.
We'll get taken down, but feel free to watch it. did you have anything to add from an NVIDIA perspective about GPU-intensive applications and remote virtual workstations?
Oh, what Chris said, right? So, in fact, this morning I actually came back from a customer to my room to run this webinar, and it was actually a media entertainment company who's using Teradici and remote, and they do really mad high-end stuff, right? It's just crazy, and they go, "Yep, great." Now, to be very fair, latency plays a story in this. Once you start crossing continents, things get challenging. But it's a fantastic solution that works really well, and given how especially professionally in this space, they're bound by all sorts of security controls and like that plays tightly into it. But we often get asked the question, surely there's stuff you can't do in a virtual machine that we can do on a physical machine, right? And the answer is, actually, there's stuff you can't do on physical machines that we can do in virtual. So, one of the blades you can throw in 2 T4s or double graphics cards, or reorchestrate, or VDI by day and render by night across the entire blade chassis. And on a physical workstation, you're limited to usually 2 GPUs, maybe 3 on a super high-end, very expensive one. Well, we can orchestrate all sorts of stuff like that, much bigger in a virtual machine that you can't do on a physical workstation. So the irony is, it's the other way around. And sizing is important. So depending what you need, we scale it accordingly. And Office type users or Photoshop type users who are a bit bigger, or graphics intensive media entertainment customers or video editing who are a bit bigger again, and even some compute customers who are, how much can you give me? There is never enough. We grow that out across the whole chassis if they could. We can do all of these things. And as I said, we can chop and change it because we can orchestrate it in the data center easily. You can't do that on a physical workstation. It's a fixed unit of compute that doesn't change until you throw it away and buy a new one. And that's problematic. So absolutely, you can do all sorts of fun things.
If you think about it, Jeremy, I mean, what's happening here is, not to put too fine a point on it, everyone who is accessing a remotely hosted workload is accessing the power of a data center. Everyone has access to the power of a data center. They're bringing the workload from the data center to their screen. And discrete graphics has been a fact of life for a long time. As you start looking at the more computationally and graphically intense workloads, I loved the slide earlier. You just had all of these major ISVs, whether they were sort of the DaVinci Resolves, the Nuke, Maya, Blender. You also had a number of other industries like the oil and gas industry. If you think about it, a workstation doesn't know what it is going to be when it grows up. When it's manufactured, it's got discrete graphics capability, it's got error checking memory, it's got higher performance storage, it's got all of the things that now, I mean, in a data center, in a modern data center architecture, you're absolutely given the cream of the crop from that perspective. So users of any of these applications are getting those applications powered by the most the highest performance infrastructure components you can imagine: server, storage, compute, networking. It's all down to that power of one as well.
And that makes the IT people happy, right? So as you said before, I think really well, there's always that contention between, we talk about the balance of security or the balance of what IT wants versus what the users can have. Well, if we can make everybody happy, isn't that a win? And in fact, talked about, universities going back and what challenges and how do they fall. The funniest story I've heard is it was the biggest challenge for facilities, because they were told, we don't need those labs anymore. We can just use regular rooms. In fact, those nice social open spaces where it flows well and it looks cool and not very dungeon-like. Yeah. So whip out those rooms, get rid of them, and make them cool like everything else. And the engineering students can work there now. And the engineering students are like, we've got lights. So if it's a problem for those people, that's great. But the IT people, and to take Paul's point, everything you do in the data center, it's got all the ilities, securability, agility, flexibility, all those things that they can do, and they can do it faster. They can make the users happier, quicker, right? So it's a real win-win.
That's great, and it's from my experience, it's pretty rare to find a win-win solution that has students, faculty, and IT managers all happy simultaneously.
That's right.
True that.
So we're onto a true winner here. I might just, might just touch quickly on one last topic. I'll just find the slide. But I'm sure there's people in the audience saying, these solutions sound amazing, but oh boy, they sound expensive. So just before we get to the Q&A, we might just quickly touch on what type of technologies have allowed colleges and universities to overcome old barriers of performance, which I think we've addressed, but particularly cost and complexity to deliver a customized learning experience.
Yeah, in my former life, before I went to the dark side and became a salesperson, I hope my sales manager isn't watching this, but I was that IT person. And one of the things that is so obvious to me about these kinds of solutions is that when you implement an end user compute virtualization strategy, you are optimizing all of your IT investments. You are rationalizing your application catalog. You're virtualizing those applications. So there's tremendous opportunity for optimization. I've used that word already, but really what it means is that instead of 10 different versions of some Adobe product or 10 different versions of all the different products. And so that old distributed PC model where IT had to come in and they had to make sure that if the class that's being taught in that particular term was this kind of an AEC workload, that they had to re-image those machines. And then not only did they have to re-image those machines, but they also had to make certain that they, as they're resys prepping everything, that they're going through and ensuring that all of the necessary patches and updates are brought up to date. Here, now you have a massive deduplication, really, of all of the distributed assets are now in this sort of single core golden image with all of these applications, just pointers, user data, just pointers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that's probably the most significant opportunity. Yeah, there's a lot of cost associated with infrastructure, but even there, modern data center infrastructures, hyper-converged infrastructures have gotten us to a point where you have a data center in a 10U unit that sits in a rack. You've got the management infrastructure, you've got the hosted VMs, everything is there. So it's a model that is coming together and to use the term, converging in a way that allows for really efficient use of an organization and an institution's resources. And ultimately, that's focused on delivering better student outcomes.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It is an important question. So I was taught this by one of my customers several years ago. The word cost came up, and it's on the slide. The question's there. And he was asking, okay, what's the total cost of the materials, blah, blah. And I said, so is that the cost? He goes, that's not the cost. He goes, that's the cost of acquisition. He goes, we're not looking at that. And I said, sorry, what? He goes, no, we look at the overall cost. And he said, there is a cost of, there's value and there's cost. So if you look at a life cycle of this, what do you get out of it? If you want to compare cost of acquisition for the bill of materials for one of Chris's blade chassis, the CAS software and the GPUs and stuff, absolutely you have to. That's absolutely valid. But as this customer said, he said, I want to work through with you, I want to do a bit of a workshop and replay my change management for the past 12 months. This is pre-COVID. For the last 12 months through a virtual architecture versus having physical and what it means. This is an architectural firm. So think AutoCAD, that sort of stuff, fairly chunky workstations they had. they workshop through what it meant for their ability to tweak and tune and change and patch and all those things they had to do and what that meant for them. That organization has, I think, about 2 physical workstations and 2 mobile workstations now. Absolutely everything else is virtual. They're on T4s and they love it. They're based in Sydney. And so when we look at cost, the important question is, what we mean by, is it acquisition cost or total lifecycle cost? And then also what you value. There are things that you can quantify, dollars, but there are things you need to qualify. So you asked a question about COVID when we started. Let's talk about, from an IT perspective, I'm hearing the term long COVID for IT versus long COVID and people who've had it. And I said to this customer 2 weeks ago, what does that mean? He said, well, if anybody has the sniffles, they're home for 2 weeks, right? So think about a student who has to self-isolate. Will they damage their learning experience or not? What does this mean for them? What does this mean for your ability to provide education for them? And yes, this is relevant in the corporate world, but it's also relevant in the student world. So there's lots of non-dollar items that are qualifiable that we need to bring into this equation that are part of the new landscape that we live in. So even if this is 5 to 10% more expensive to deploy this, and it doesn't have to be, what does it mean for how you do what you do and how the students, the faculty, the researchers, what does it mean for what they do? And there's different parts of the cost equation here, and if you balance that out, the majority of my customers, unless they're pretty poorly designed it and over-spec it, it comes out relatively neutral, relatively similar, but the benefits they get, the soft benefits, are absolutely massive, and these are important things to consider. As I said, beyond just acquisition cost. So yeah, and as I said before, ask Chris for a blade. It'll be there in, I don't know, let's say a couple of weeks, a month, whatever it may be with shipping. But you plug it in, 5 minutes later, you've expanded the workloads. You can't do that with desktops. I was chatting to a customer today who, there's a BIOS issue, and you put a password on it, which we have to for security. Then you update the BIOS, and then the motherboard's locked, and you've got to replace. No, not with virtual machines. Not an issue. Doesn't happen. Absolutely doesn't happen. So, very different play, I think, long term. Very different play.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is exciting technology and exciting solutions, and it sounds like it's here to stay. Okay, so we might wrap up the panel discussion there and get to some of these questions. We've had quite a lot of them come through, and I am mindful we are running quite short of time, so we might just address 2 or 3 of them, and then we'll publish the complete set of questions and answers after the webinar. So first one here that has come through simply is there anything that I can do in a virtual setup? Anything that I can't do in a virtual setup that I can do physically?
Dongles. I'd say dongles. Apart from that, we're all good. I hate dongles. So yeah, there's not many of those left anymore. Everything else, you can scale it bigger on a virtual system, no problem. Good.
Yeah. And funnily enough, Sapply does offer solutions for providing dongles to virtual machines. So
there you go. No, thank you. Not even after this. I didn't know that, but now I do. Right.
Okay. Now this looks like a question for you, Chris, relating to the AHK core module. They're asking, once these have been installed, how is the infrastructure easily able to cope with changing user or departmental requirements between semesters? So I guess if you have more or less students doing the same course semesters,
sure,
people come in.
Yeah, no, great question. That is the beauty, and Michael touched on this, and so did Paul. But that's the beauty of having it server side, right? So if you start with just a few blades, knowing that I want to accommodate my capabilities today, my workloads today, knowing that I have the capability to expand, add more blades, assign workloads to different blades, assign more GPUs to different blades. I mean, it's really designed for flexibility. And in terms of, we've talked a lot about IT administrators and soft costs, and I touched on the fact that we built these modules we partnered with Dell to build these, right? So if you've got an MX7000 chassis today, and you don't have GPU capability, you can add those at any time. It's simply a matter of sliding into the back, installing the drivers for the GPU, and you're up and going. You don't have to install any additional software. It uses the same management tools as the MX7000. We use the same video BIOS that Dell uses. So from a user perspective or an IT administrator perspective, an Amulet Hotkey core module functions like a standard Dell expansion module, no different than adding storage or networking or what have you. But the key takeaway is the platform itself is designed for flexibility that you can add or reassign. I think Michael talked about, you do rendering by night and VDI by day. You can have physics in the morning and chemistry in the afternoon. What have you? You can assign those workloads to a schedule and adjust as you get more users and more load on those computers.
Awesome. So it sounds like it's very scalable and retractable. Just finding, this one looks like it'd be good for you, Paul. So what are some examples of workloads that require a GPU and some that don't?
Okay, that slide that I was referring to earlier, those are the kinds of workloads where discrete graphics is definitely necessary. And that comes down to if you're doing, say Maya, for example, where you go from wireframe to a shaded model, then you want to apply volumetric fog and lighting effects, and all those things require CUDA cores, lots and lots of CUDA cores. So having all of that additional discrete dedicated hardware to basically take all of that load off of the CPU, that's definitely necessary. Non-GPU workloads are things like I would say your garden variety types of workforce productivity applications, your Microsoft Office suite, if you like. Thankfully, PowerPoint doesn't yet require a whole lot of graphics horsepower. But I think you can also make the case that graphics makes the user experience. That is what we're looking at. I mean, I did papers in VI. Okay, you see the white in my chin, right? I did Unix administration. I did Banyan Vines administration early in my IT. That was all that character-based world. But now the user experience is really paramount. People want to have engaging experiences with software, and those applications really they just shine with a GPU.
And I would kind of.
I don't know if did that answer the question.
I think so. Chris, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to tag on to that. I mean, we have, when we're talking to customers or we're talking to different sales organizations within Dell, for example, we do a lot of work with them, obviously. We have information about the industries that can take advantage of GPU offload and GPU acceleration. And of course, we've talked about a lot of those. It's media and entertainment, it's government, it's oil and gas, it's engineering, architecture. But Paul really touched on this, that we at the bottom we have a slide that kind of shows all these industries, and at the bottom it says really any industry, any market segment, any customer can take advantage of GPU acceleration. It is about the user experience. We've all, probably at some point used a non-PC over IP remoting in, and the graphics are all hazy looking and it's slow, and it's just, even if you do it on your own home LAN, it's still slow. But with PC over IP and GPU acceleration, it really just makes the user feel like they're at a high-powered workstation, and that's important. That you get more productivity, you get better learning out of it. You don't have to fight with the hardware or the software. It just is. It's a better experience, as we talked about. It's a win-win for everybody.
Excellent, and of course, and it applies for all three of you that your respective solutions are able to be tailored to the graphic intensity required for the solution as well. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Horses for courses. Got to get it right. We can help with that design too. We do that a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, these things are formulaic in nature. We understand the hardware requirements, and there are reference architectures that are put together to support all these different kinds of workloads, because at the end of the day, whether it's right underneath the desk or whether it's coming from 1,000 kilometers away, the end user experience, in order to be productive, they can't suffer from eye strain. It's got to be artifact free. It's got to be color accurate. The user experience is the prime directive.
Fantastic. Well, I see we've just gone over our allotted time, so we might wrap it up till next time. Feel free to submit feedback under I think there's a feedback tab next to the attachments and the Q&A tabs. We're going to be doing a lot more of these, so we'd love to hear your feedback on what you'd like to see next time. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. Thanks to all the fantastic panelists. We're all around the world in all different time zones, so some of us have had to stay up late, and so it's much appreciated. And until next time, we'll thanks for taking the time, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jeremy.
everyone.
Everybody.
Distinguished panel.